So, as you all know, I'm the president of the Air Capital Skeptics. The title of my talk is extremely important, and for those of you who have been paying attention to my life over the last year and a half, I have had the wonderful opportunity to have not just one recurrence, but 2 recurrences of mono in a year.
Oh, no.
And I don't know what you all know about mono. I don't know how educated you are about it. I can give you all the details because I think I can get my degree in it. But the main thing you have to know about mono is it makes you exhausted. And I'm not talking, I'm kind of tired, exhausted. I was a single mom at one point, going to school and working full time. And that, I would rather be that exhausted than having mono exhausted. I slept for hours on end. I couldn't respond to my children. I couldn't go into work on time. It had an extremely negative impact on my life and those around me. But one of the things you learn when you're that exhausted, you find out what's important to you. And I do have some notes. This is an all week, by the way. I really learned over the last year that what's important to me is STEM outreach and education. That is my driving force every day when I sign up for too many things, and it's always because of that. Even when I'm bone weary, exhausted, I kept pushing towards those things. The thing is, I am not an educator. I could never work in a school building every day of my life. Monica, you're a wonderful human being. I taught at a Kids Day Out environment after my oldest daughter was born because I could take my daughter and it was some pay. And I thought I was going to murder every single small child in that room. Granted, that wasn't really teaching, that was more of glorified babysitting and making sure that 3-year-olds don't kill each other. But I was absolutely miserable about that. So for me to want to do education still seems odd to me. But what I've discovered is that I worked tech classes over this last summer at Exploration Place. And I was miserable there, but not because of the kids, and not because of what I was teaching. I was miserable because of the constraints I was given to teach. I was overcrowded. I was trying to teach programming to children, and I had 20 children in a classroom trying to teach programming, all ranging from the age of 4th grade to 9th grade, with no beginner. And it was just 20 kids in the room. No one checked to see if they knew anything about coding, had ever touched a computer in my life. I had to teach 20 kids, and it was miserable because I couldn't. There's no way. And so it hurt me when I saw kids who truly wanted to learn what I was teaching. I couldn't because I was too busy trying to help either troublemakers who needed constant attention. They didn't want to be in the summer camp, but because it was the only summer camp that accepted their age group, their parents shoved them in it. Or kids who have never opened a laptop in their life, and that's not their fault. But if I have a kid over here who I'm trying to teach conditional loops to, and then I have a child over here who doesn't know what the start menu is, I'm torn. And so I have to help the kid with the start menu because he's so frustrated now, he can't even get to the program. And the child off to the side who truly is interested in programming, I have to ignore. And that was extremely painful for me. I walked out of the Exploration Place at least 3 or 4 times over the summer over my anger. I didn't feel like I was teaching. I felt like I was back to that glorified babysitting. And I loved it, though, when I had kids in my class get it. I taught a very young girl circuitry. She had never done circuits in her life. We pulled up her Arduino, and she made the stoplight. She programmed it, she figured it out, and then after I taught her about the resistors and everything, she expanded on it and then made the lights go in different sync with the programming. She had never touched a circuit board until I taught her how. And her excitement, her eyes lighting up in that moment was wonderful. It was an euphoric rush for me to see her excited. And when I talked to her parents after the camp, I was like, please put her in something. She has a gift for this. She loves it. She caught on to the concept so fast. I have no idea if I did or not, obviously. But I realized I loved that. I loved seeing that joy. I do science Saturdays at my house over the summer when I have energy. And I just let kids blow things up. We've done vinegar bombs, we have balloons around the house, we've done, in years past, I've done public with children and talked about non-Newtonian fluids. We've lit things on fire before. And I like it. I love doing that. I love doing it with my own children. I love doing it with other people's children because they get so excited about it. To them, it's a brand new discovery. It's something they've never done before. Because how many parents let their kids just make a mess in the kitchen? No. We crack eggs and we feel it, how it feels, and we check out the membranes. Not many parents are okay with that, and that's fine. But I am. I don't care about messes sometimes, much to my boyfriend's clean freakness. Because to me, the excitement they have over that is worth it. And I'm letting them try out new things for themselves. And that's kind of a new thing for me. I think most of you have heard me talk about the fact 7 years ago, I was a good Christian housewife who did not believe in evolution. I didn't believe in almost anything scientific, actually. I did no research on my own. I went to church and I listened to what I was told, what I should believe, and I never did any further research. That spark of interest was not there. And over the last year, I've had a good chance to really think about what changed in 7 years. And I think to understand what changed, I have to understand why I became that person. And this is where it gets kind of personal. I'm going to talk about my childhood. I'm going to try to gloss over most parts, but I didn't have a great childhood. So if I tear up, or if you tear up, don't look at me. It's just because the way I was raised turned me into that person 7 years ago. And you have to understand how that happens and why this has turned into what it is for me now. When I was born, there's lots of stories about how I was born. But what I know is my biological mother was 16. She was in jail. I was given up for adoption at birth. I was a crack baby, and I had alcohol syndrome. The doctors didn't have a lot of hope in my life. And for the first 3 months of my life, I went through withdrawals because that was before they had medication for babies to help them come off the withdrawals. And then I really never had much more contact with my biological mother. I don't know my biological father's name at all. So I was adopted by my biological mom's adopted dad and stepmom. I could spend 45 minutes talking about my family tree too, and you still wouldn't understand. But pretty much, these are the people that I call mom and dad growing up. And they were very interesting people, to say the least. I was raised in the realm of perfection. I started trumpet when I was 3 years old. I started violin in kindergarten. And then I wanted to play viola, but the viola was way too big for a kindergartner. So I switched to viola though in 3rd grade. But we were supposed to be musicians. We didn't have a choice in that. My oldest sister played violin and clarinet. My middle sister played sax and cello. And I remember my mom taking me to Edgington's at 3, just one of my first memories, and telling me I had to pick my instruments. And I was no more than 3 or 4. So I picked trumpet, which angered her a lot because trumpet's a man's instrument. Also viola, by the way, just so you know. I didn't know that, but my mother was convinced of it. So I learned trumpet, and I taught myself trumpet. We couldn't afford, we couldn't afford private teachers. So I learned myself. And I remember my mother reprimanding me because it took me over 6 months to go through a beginner's book at the age of 3. I had a speech impediment as a child. I'm farsighted, and no one caught it. And so a thing you have to know about when babies learn to speak, they look at your mouth. You hold a baby this close, because they say, at 8 inches. I can't see crap at 8 inches. You're a giant blur at 8 inches without my glasses. I can't see anything. So I never got to see how people's mouths read when they make words. So by the time I was 4 or 5 and I was supposed to be going to kindergarten, I couldn't do any words or letters that required your mouth to move. So my older sister's name was Kimberly. I called her Ember because I didn't know how to move my mouth. I didn't know how to move my tongue. None of that was taught to me, and I didn't have the intuitive sense to do it. I don't know if that is intuitive for kids or not, but I lacked that ability. So my mother tried to put me in special ed. She was convinced that I was damaged, that, I was not as smart as my sisters, I was not as good as my sisters. It was a common thing growing up that I heard. And the special ed teachers tested me, and they know she's extremely smart. She's passed all the tests she can't say words, but she is very smart with paper, and she does. My mother didn't believe it. She took me for testing like 3 or 4 times. I went back, that blue building next to Schilling School, I hated that building because my mother took me there all the time trying to put me in special ed. When I was in kindergarten, and they finally figured out that I was pretty much blind without glasses, and they got me in speech therapy, my speech improved. But my reading was off the charts. I was at least second grade reading level in kindergarten. And plus my math. I was extremely good at math at a young age. It was when you can't talk to anyone, I read books. And my sisters were older than me. My oldest sister was 10 years older than me. I sold her calculus books all the time and read them. I also loved, there was this children's show when I was growing up on Nickelodeon called Cities of Gold. And it was the adventures of these 3 young children, and they come from Spain over to South America in the search for the cities of gold. And you learn about Cortez and the Strait of Magellan and all of these historic things. And I was so fascinated by the Mayans and the Incas. I was like, oh my God. And the things they built. I couldn't talk, but I loved the show. We had encyclopedias at home and at school. I was the kindergartner, and I was reading encyclopedia articles about Mayans and Incas. My teacher, my kindergarten teacher, went to my mother and was like, she can't stay in kindergarten. I got in trouble a lot. I had ADHD. I didn't discover that until a year or so ago. So I couldn't stay focused in school. But my teacher saw that I couldn't focus on reading, and I was extremely excited about that kind of thing. She told my mother, you need to up her grade. I think she would do well. My mother said, no, there's no way she's smart enough for that. You are mistaken. And I was in the room for this conversation, by the way. All of my early childhood memories is of my mother saying things like that to my teachers. When I told her I wanted to be a paleontologist, I love dinosaurs, I love history. I want to go see the historic history so bad. I love history. That is something like if I could have gone to school for anything and not have to worry about my money, it would have been to study ancient history and civilizations, because I find them fascinating and interesting in how their culture interacts based on their beliefs at the time and how they adapted to different environments. But that's a whole other talk. I was told girls can't be paleontologists. I got that one a lot. Girls can't be. And it was really weird, because my mother was one of the very first female drill sergeants in the military. And she would tell us stories all the time that as a woman, you have to not let a man carry your tools. I heard this kind of stuff, but then I would also be told, but you have to do what a man says. You can't do anything outside of woman's scope. I was told I should learn to cook. I was always compared to my sisters because I'm loud, I'm obnoxious, I'm outgoing and flamboyant. I see you looking over there. My sisters were wallflowers. So to my mother, I was this demon child who was retarded and would not be quiet. And she would constantly say, I love Tonya. She's so pretty. She's so cute and energetic. But she's not very bright. And she's just kind of being a problem child. That was my whole upbringing, was hearing that from my mother. I wanted to be, my teachers when I got to 2nd grade put up for, we had an enrichment class, kids who are smart get to go dissect pig hearts and all this other kind of stuff. My mother wouldn't allow it because I would not be able to keep up with my peers because there was no way I was smart enough to do that. In 5th grade, because I played 3 instruments. I auditioned for the youth symphony, which to even get an audition, you're supposed to be in 7th grade. My instructor pulled some strings, let me audition. Not only did I make it, I beat out a high schooler and a 9th grader. And my mother reprimanded me for not getting a higher chair. I don't know if you know anything about music, but the higher your chair, that means you're better. I was in 5th grade in a middle school, high school orchestra, and I beat people, and my mother still couldn't be proud of me. And I wanted to do everything growing up. I was the kid with the sticks that was sword. I was Kira, if anyone knows my youngest daughter. I was her. I was running. I would go to the creek. We weren't supposed to go to the camp creek. I would go to the creek, and we would look for frogs and toads and stuff, and see if we could scare each other. I loved doing that kind of stuff growing up. I broke a lot of things. I took apart our sewing machine at one point, and I tried putting it back. I was curious. I wanted to know how it worked. I got in huge trouble for that. My dad was a mechanic. I loved hanging out with him working on cars. But when I actually wanted to learn how to work on the cars, of course, I was told, girls don't do that. I was good for putting my hand in the small places to drop the socket that my dad got stuck in the small places with people working the car. A 5-year-old, 6-year-old hand's perfect for that. That's how I did learn fractions that way, because I liked organizing his tool set. So I learned my fractions by craftsman wrenches, by the way. So as I got older, and the more I tried, the more I was told to stop. I didn't follow convention rules for school. I hated it. Even though I was extremely bright in school, I got great grades. My teachers would always say, she's not focused, she doesn't like to stay on task, she does things uniquely. I would always put my own twist on any sort of at-home project. In art class, I would never follow what we were supposed to do, because this when you're like working with like paper mache and stuff like that, I was curious about how it worked. So I started like molding other things on the table and like my hand, and I was always in trouble in school because everything I did was not acceptable, or I wasn't good enough to do it. So now that you really feel sorry about my childhood, now comes the part that most of you know, but both of my parents ended up getting cancer. Both of them died within 6 months of each other. I spent my 11th birthday at my dad's viewing at funeral home. My mom died 6 months later. But then, instead of just my parents doing that, I started acting out in school, of course, because I was, you just lost your parents. So now I became a problem kid, on top of not being a smart kid, on top of I'm a girl and I shouldn't be able to be interested in these things. And to make matters worse, my custody, because my biological mother was nowhere in the picture, my custody was passed to my oldest adopted sister and her husband. He was extremely abusive. From 5th, 6th, and 7th grade until 8th grade when I went to foster care, I was abused. I was constantly told that I was worthless. At one point, he told me that he could kill me and I was so worthless, no one would even care. And so I started acting out at school, and then I became the trouble child at school. And then everyone, I was in advanced math classes, I was in math and advanced science classes. Luckily at that point, the school finance was like, no, we have to move her out, we don't have a choice. But I started failing those classes. And then it came back, oh, yes, you're right, she wasn't smart enough because I was now failing my classes. So they put me back into regular classes, which then I became bored and I failed those classes too. I took geometry in 5th grade. Putting me back in geometry in high school, middle school was just, I know what a point is, I know what a line is, let's go past this, so I was bored. But now I had the stigma of a child, I was a trouble child, and then I got put back in other classes to make me, and I felt dumb. And that was since I was such a reoccurring theme in my life. By the time I left, I got put in foster care and was in a foster home. I quit time. That spark, that person that I was the child who was gone. And it was difficult because I hung out with the smart kids. I was best friends with the entire land clan. And all you tech nerds know exactly what that means. But I never tried. When they had conversations about computers or their advanced calculus classes, I remember being interested. I remember wanting to ask questions, but then I remember backing off. Because I didn't want to come across as stupid or unintelligent. I didn't want to make waves. I wanted, all the female girls who went to those things, they sat in the corner and talked. And so I was always torn between, I should go sit with the girls because that's what I'm supposed to do, or wanting to hang out with my guy friends and play video games with them. And I always ended up, I would try to play the video games, and of course I didn't have a PC at home, so I sucked at PC game, so they would kick my ass. I'd end up eventually going to hang out with the girls because that was my place. I couldn't game, I wasn't smart, I was worthless, so I might as well just sit in the corner and be quiet. In all that time growing up, no one talked to me about anything. I didn't know what an actual engineer was until I was an adult. Up until I moved to Wichita, I thought an engineer was a person on a train. It was never a career concept told to me at any stage in my life. And of course, by the time I got to high school, the idea of, because my high school did this whole career advancement thing, you picked what field you might want your career in, because they thought that you had it figured out by high school or something. And those were the classes that you took. Well, I was a musician. That was what my mom wanted me to be. That was what I was told I had to be. It was the only thing of work that I was ever told that I could be. Musicians don't make money, by the way. I don't know why my mother was so gung ho on that. I don't think she thought that one through. So I did the fine arts course. So I was in band, I was in drama, I wasn't in vocal, I can't sing. I wasn't in any of the advanced classes. We had to take a computer app course, and I failed Excel. I just want you all to know that I failed Excel. Not because I just didn't try. I didn't have that intuition to look things up or study, and all those things I remember doing as a kid. I was at one point told in my childhood, it was science class, I was in 7th grade, I remember this. Mrs. Sturgis, my 7th grade science teacher, she was amazing. Actually, it had us say at one point that someone else knew the answer besides Tonya. We fast forward a few years later, and I didn't bother even researching the answers. I wasn't doing my homework, I didn't try. And I didn't pass the test. Drove my teachers nuts, so I could ace the test without studying or doing homework. But that spark was gone. The world had destroyed it from me. And by the time, so I became an adult, I did a short stint in the military. That didn't go well. So by the time I left the military, I got a job. I met my now ex-husband. I went to church. He told me I was supposed to get married, be a good housewife, and have kids. And that's exactly what I did for 10 years after being an adult. That young girl who read encyclopedias for fun of it was gone. So, fast forward to when I went to my first skeptics in the pub. I was terrified. I was scared. I was the only girl. You can imagine how much she did. I didn't belong. And I remember at one point, one of the skeptics, I walked up to the building 3 times to walk back to my car, to sit in my car, to heavy breathe, to walk back up to the building, to look inside, to go back to the car, to heavy breathe, because every time I looked inside, I saw these young, bright students. Most of them had graduated WSU with their degrees. And I was like, I can never be as smart as them. I can never fit in. I don't belong to this group. Luckily, I persevered. Luckily, I was very lucky to meet my best friend. And that was when going to the skeptics in the pub, I was asked, since was the only one with 2 young kids and they wanted to make it more family friendly, if I'd be willing to put on Skeptics in the Park and do science experiments with kids. And I was like, no. And then I was asked, I was dating the leader of the ages group at the time, so he had some pull on me, so I did Skeptics in the Park. I had to do a lot of research for that, though. I had never once, my daughter at that point, Ari was 5 or 6, she was my age at that point. My life went to hell. And Kira was barely a year old. And I had never done a science experiment with my kids. For those of you who know me now, realize I had never done a science experiment with Ariana until she was over 5 years old. It's never occurred to me. She was my daughter. I was supposed to teach her how to cook, which I was trying to do, not very well because I don't like cooking. I'm not great at it. And I was supposed to teach her how to be quiet when you go into school. So I had to do all this research for Skeptics in the Park because I had no clue. So I went to the internet lifesaver, and started finding these really awesome experiments. And then as I was finding these experiments, I was like, why does I want to do experiments with them? I wanted to explain to them why they work. So then I had to start researching, well, why does the chemical reaction, why does baking soda vinegar explode the way it does? Like, everyone knows that, but what's happening? Why is it producing carbon dioxide as it blows up? So I started having to research these things. And as I researched them, that spark started to come back. And then when I did Skeptics in the Park that summer with the kids, it was a pain, by the way, because trying to do science experiments where there's no running water, not a good idea. But I loved doing it with kids. It was amazing. They got so excited over this stuff, and then they would ask you questions, and I realized I didn't have an answer, so I'd have to look that up to answer them. And it became this give and take thing. And then because I started doing it with my kids over the summer, they wanted to do more science experiments at home during the school year and stuff. It's like, oh, okay. So I started doing these science experiments with my kids at home. And then I got the crazy idea that maybe I shouldn't be stuck in admin work my whole life. That maybe I was smart enough to not just have to do paperwork. So I enrolled in Butler for my computer science degree. Butler was not the greatest choice, but it worked for what it was. But I struggled. I didn't have the best teachers there. Mostly my C-sharp teacher, BD teacher, and stuff. I hate him so much. So I was really, after my first semester, I got back down on myself. I didn't do great in BD. I hated technology solutions. Oh, I will never be an IT person. Never. I understand it, but I hated it. And then my next year, though, I got my HTML CSS teacher. She was amazing. I would ask her questions, because when I asked questions in C#, my instructor would tell me, well, it's a hard concept, eventually you'll figure it out. Well, that doesn't help me. Oh. But my HTML teacher, I would put questions in my code, and she would answer my questions in the code with comments. And she would explain things to me, or she would write me personal emails when I had questions. And I started gaining confidence, because I was able to make web pages now with like HTML and CSS. And then there was at one point an Ad Astra Academy put on by Dev ICT. I got the courage to enroll in that. And it was a 4-weekend workshop that I had to go to. And I was scared shitless going to my first workshop, because now because I did online classes. I never had to walk into a school building with other people. I didn't have to see other developers. But now I'm walking into a workshop with other people who are also coding. Most of those people at that workshop were men. And I instantly shut down. Like, I felt those old fears come back. And luckily, the president of MICT, Jacob Walker, was amazing. He helped me a lot. So by the time I ended those 4 workshops, I had a confidence in me that I had not had in a while. I felt good enough to maybe call myself a beginning developer. And it was so nice to have that one-on-one with Jacob and to have someone I could ask questions, and it wasn't this school setting. And then I went on to develop more. I ended up getting a job, and I'm still part of DevICT, and now I do community outreach for DevICT because I want to help beginning programmers who probably felt at me at one point, help them realize that no, you can't be a programmer. We all struggle, and it's okay. And so now that spark is back in me. I've completely changed my stance on a lot of things. I've become president of Skeptics for a reason. And no, I will tell you I'm not the most educated person in the world, but I'll no longer tell you I'm the least intelligent person like I used to. That used to be, I would always tell people I'm the least intelligent person in Skeptics. That's what I felt like. I mean, most of you guys have degrees and 5 degrees or something and stuff after your name. I don't. I never finished that computer science degree, by the way. But I'm starting to recognize I'm just not as educated as some people. I'm not intelligent. So I'm educated, and I can fix that, and that is something I can do. And so I've learned to go to experts in fields. I don't have all the answers, but she has a lot of the ones I don't know. We have different speakers today coming that will have some of the answers I know I don't have. But now I enjoy that stuff again. I'm not back to reading encyclopedias by any means. I barely have time to read as it is. But I'm back to finding that spark that was in that child. Which brings me back to why do I kill myself for science education? Why over the past year when I should be sleeping? I should not have planned a conference and a science march within a week of each other with Mono. Let me tell you, that's not a good idea. And my doctor, everyone down the line has told me to please stop. But I can't. Because what I discovered in the year of finding Mono was when I felt exhausted and tired, the moment I started talking to someone about ideas to reach out to the community, I could feel that exhaustion fade away. I felt a life in me that normally wasn't there. When I was laying in bed and lifeless, if I got a message about doing something, it woke me up. It woke that spark within me. And I realize now that I want to bring that spark to other kids. I can only think of what would have happened when I was in school with my horrible family if my school would have been partnered with a group that came and did science or tech experiments or engineering things with the classes. Because a lot of those kids will never get exposed to anything from outside of their home besides school. Be it their income, be it their upbringing. They will never have a chance to find out what they could be interested in, that they could have been an engineer. You don't want to find out at 30 that you would have been probably an amazing mechanical engineer, but I'm not going to school at this point in my life for mechanical engineering. That would have been good information to have when I was younger. But I can't do it. I can't keep killing myself. My boyfriend's about done with it. Alex is about done with it. My kids are about done with it. And that's why, instead of personally killing myself, I have now decided to kill myself with skeptics in hopes that I'll find more people, more of you, who get just as excited about refinding that spark in people. And it's not just children. They're a great age to start with. Like, young children still have an active imagination that needs to be engaged. And they still think, for the most part, they can conquer the world. Give a kid a stick and a sword, and they're going to go slay a dragon. Well, give them a science experiment. Let's see what happens. Give them a circuit and have them build a robot. If they can turn a stick into a sword to slay a dragon, what could they do with a circuit? What could they do with learning basic chemical reactions? To hit that so young and to build that confidence in that is not something you can replicate as an adult. I've discovered sadly. Like, I get excited still, but as you get older, new concepts don't come as well. So that's why my outreach, why my pushing for these, doing things with children is important to me, but also adults. I feel like, how many adults out there in my shoes that are just now finding their passions at the age of 35? So that's why I'm up here. That's why this conference is science-based. It's not what it was in years past. Because we have an atheist group. We have a progressive Oasis group, which is great for human rights. I totally support. But none of those things matter in the long run if we don't reinstall that spark and joy in science, in STEM, in life, in young children. And it's not going to come from our legislators at this point. It's not going to come from our schools. It's going to be from outside groups willing to take on a responsibility to go to schools, to go to outreach programs, to Boys and Girls Club, all of these things, which didn't hear nice last night, and teach these kids something they didn't think they could ever do. I will continue killing myself for that dream. I would just not like to anymore. And as a leader of a group, burnout is big. We have 2 nonprofits in this area that have shut down last year because leaders are burnt out. They don't get enough volunteers. They don't get enough support. I don't want to fall into that category. I don't want to see the momentum that we could have. We're technically 600 members strong. There are some amazing people in our group with amazing skills. So I'm putting that call out. I'm putting that asking for help. But instead of letting me kill myself for this, let's do it together so for one, I don't die. But for 2, we could, our ending statement and skeptics, you can find it here. Our mission statement ending paragraph is exactly this. Air Capital Skeptics is a group dedicated to the pursuit of science and skepticism. Science and skepticism are about the excitement of exploration and discovery. The world is an incredible place, and we hope to encourage the spirit of exploration and discovery by showing how amazing it is. So please, please, help me do our mission statement and bring that joy of discovery again to young children and adults in the local area. And that way, hopefully, I can finally recover from mono and be a president again and be able to plan this conference with mono. So, give me some credit. But yeah, that's what I have to say. That is my drive and my passion. And just know I won't quit. Sorry, honey, but I'm not quitting anytime soon. So even if I end up in the hospital bed, this is what I'm pursuing as Ashley joined me. What time is it?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Quick 5-minute break. And then our next speaker, Paul, will be on.